Everybody, good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, January 4th, 2024 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Yes. Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Brink.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
And Culhane, Spire, Ford, and Aletsky are absent. We do have a quorum, and we have one variance request on the agenda, which will require a five
Unanimous with
affirmative
the members
votes.
in
Yep.
present. Yep. All right. Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, number 3. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Move forward with that agenda. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. 4A is from the December 21st, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Have a motion to approve? And a second. Any additional discussion on those minutes? Everything looks in order? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved.
Kays abstains.
Noted. Moving on to item 5 on the regular agenda is 5A is board consideration of a variance request, and I'll let Brandy take us through that.
Okay, thank you, Blake. So this variance request is before the board. Once again, you saw it previously on December 7th. The request is for a 10-foot rear yard setback in the I-1 district for the property located at 1015 16th Street Southwest. And the applicant is Josh Susi. I'll pull up the vicinity map here. So typically in an I-1 district, the requirement is to have a 30-foot rear yard setback. You'll see that from historically, the property to the north received a reduced rear yard setback, which is less than the 10 feet that's being requested. As discussed in the previous meeting, drainage was a concern within this area. So the applicant has been proactive in showing some drainage improvements then that can be done with the construction of, where does this mouse always jump? Okay. With the construction of this new building here. So you can see there's the existing building, and then this is the proposed building to be a 60 by 100, and that is for the just additional, it's going to be a cold storage building. And then also just to step this back as far as why this application is before the board again, it was denied at the December 7th meeting with a vote of 4-3. So at that time then it failed. The board needs to state or set a time frame for how long an applicant must wait before coming back to the board, which was not done, and has been nothing that has really warranted that before. You'll recall a 6-month waiting period that is for ordinance amendments and including like rezones or annexations. So the Board of Adjustment has to set a time frame for which the applicant, without making substantial change to their application, must wait not to exceed 5 years. So that it will be something going forward that if an application is denied, and I've added it to our motion portion of our application here. Well, for one, to state the findings, and then also to set the time frame for if there's an application that's denied going forward. So other than that, I think that wraps up the variance request here, and I'll stand by for any questions.
We'll rely on a lot of the board that was present at the December 7th meeting. I was not present myself.
Sure. Well, I'll fill in us a little bit of what happened at the last meeting. This variance request was before us. There was a lot of discussion. One of the major things, one of our sticking points as a board was drainage. So I see there's a berm, a swale, and drainage arrows showing it draining to the north. So I see that was what was one of the things that was changed. So just letting you know that.
Also, for the chair's understanding, I think I did vote in favor of the variance at that time, primarily because of the proximity of what was going on Lot 2 to the west, being a drainage area, that the idea of no development probably occurring in that area, the previous action by a board on a variance to the north. This is kind of an odd spot, zoned I-1 zone in that area. And so that's kind of where I came out, but it failed on a 4-3 vote. It was 1 vote short.
I did see there was a lot of discussion going through the minutes and reviewing that meeting around the drainage in particular. Typically, we have city standards enforced through the engineering department around hydrology and water conveyance. Brandy, in reviewing the proposal that's in front of us here today, does this have all the required information that you would typically see in a hydrology study?
So for this application, they actually, for a variance application, they don't, or actually, if they were to even be asking for a grading permit, they wouldn't have to do a hydraulic analysis because of the size of the property. Once you get over an acre, that's when, of impervious surface, that's when a hydraulic analysis is required. But as far as with this, I mean, they are actually showing way more information than a normal variance would require. So that they are draining the water or making sure the water is conveyed to the north where the drainage easement is, and then it will go back to the natural drainage course. And then they're showing that there will be the rain gutters as well as a berm on the south side just to eliminate or ensure that there won't be any water runoff from this property with that building being there. But all the water will be routed to the north. But to circle back to your main question, this does not have all the information of a hydraulic analysis.
If this were to proceed forward and they were to get a grading permit to start grading to elevations that they're showing on this plan, at any point, are you going to be reviewing the slopes and pitches to ensure that they meet design standards with the city?
Yes.
I did note a couple of questions and concerns that I had based on some of the numbers that I'm seeing here around the pitch and the swale, for instance. We do have some standards in our engineering documentation around what the pitch should be for a swale to convey water.
Well, and this will actually, for the swale on the west side,
Yeah, the south and west side.
so that detail, now, the areas that they're showing here for the elevations, those are just their spot elevations.
Well, there's existing elevations, and then in parentheses, it's showing proposed elevations. And my concern is there's not a lot of pitch between that. On the south side of that building, for instance, it's about a 0.5% over the 60-foot, according to the proposed elevations. Now, what I want to avoid is us saying that we're going to bless a request here with some numbers on a plan that may not meet our engineering design standards.
So that will all be identified then. Now, he's showing that with the variance, and those are conditions that you guys can make, but anytime that is what is being approved or conditioned for an approval, then when he comes back for a building permit, then at that time, that site plan would have to show that detail. And especially because typically for a project like this, you wouldn't.
Right.
But because it would be a condition of an approval for them to move forward with the building permit, then we would. And then we would verify that it would be meeting, what is conditioned would be meeting our engineering design standards.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
wasn't the other part of this thing that the footings were already in and established without a permit?
Now, that wasn't a part of the variance request.
But in fact, the footings are already in without a permit.
And if you want to ask the applicant on that, I'll let you,
Well,
because
and-
it's
and
not
again, I get my-
related. Because the,
But again, I guess my thing, isn't that gonna affect we have proposed heights, but if the footings are already in, someone has already determined the height.
And
The
I'm.
floor height will be,
And I'm really like, as far as when they would come in for a building permit and we would review it, then they would, because work was done prior to a permit being issued, it'll be double the permit fee. But we don't, like, as far as looking into the details of it yet, we have not had the opportunity to do that.
and again, I guess what I'm trying to get at is if the footings are already there, to me, there's already a height established of, and we don't know, it may or may not be what we're seeing in front of us. That's my frustration is, we got the
it would-
cart in front of the horse, and now we're asking for our blessing of this, and I guess that's, part of my heartburn. I appreciate the swale and the gutters and drainage, but I'm disappointed that the footings are in before we've got a permit and anybody's really can verify we've got a elevation
And
established.
what I can tell you is that it will need to. It will need to be that elevation. So at the time, if there is a building permit issued, then that would all be inspected. And so if it's not built how it needs to be, it will need to be changed. So that is, like, that's where there is that risk. And hopefully with getting the cart in front of the horse, that things were done to what at least was being proposed.
So not only will they have to pay the double fee for the permit, but as part of the approval of the permit and the inspection process, they'll have to prove that they've designed it to meet the city standards. If they have not, and they've already constructed something, it may need to be reworked.
Yeah, and I mean, usually you have to do footing and foundation, the footing and foundation inspection. So if that means that a footing needs to be dug up, so that, or whatever the inspector needs to see, then that would be the building inspector and the building official. They'll have to make sure that they're adhering to that, because they're gonna have to see those certain components.
Okay. I will open the public hearing. I think we have the applicant here to speak.
Yeah, well, they open the public hearing.
But I didn't get into it. But if you want, I didn't know if somebody was speaking for or against or anything.
I think,
Yeah, you go ahead,
Yeah.
take that seat. I'll grab another one here.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Russ Ronking, I'm one of the owners of the property on the other side of the wet ground. And I've got some pictures that I think the thing, what everybody's heartburn was
Can we
probably.
just,
Here, we'll be able to show them if you put them within this.
Okay. When I did mine, seeing people were in the, were saying about the water getting into them. And probably some of the problem was there, the people that were mostly against it, their property is like 4 feet below floodplain. And I don't know if any of you went out and looked at the adjoining property. And where those, this is after a great, downpour, probably several inches of water. And this one shows, where their property is, and I'm shooting from my property, and there's a great amount of water down there from the heavy rainfall, and not a drop is on the property that's the hardest for everybody. And so, what I'm saying is, they're doing a good job protecting everybody's doing. And, the problem basically is you're 4 feet below, floodplain. And we both had to get our property to be able to be built. There's a law that the city has, that you gotta be a foot above the build, you gotta be a foot above the floodplain, which I did, and Josh has done. I don't begrudge those people having the property there, but, to make Josh's problem theirs, or my problem theirs, we went through that. And I think Josh has done a great job of trying to get the water away from them. And a lot of their, not gonna give them any more problems. Water issue going to the wetlands, straight out through the wetlands, which you can see when a severe rainstorm doesn't affect the people.
When you say the wetlands, are you talking the property to the west?
Yes, it designates the wetland. See any more of these pictures?
So I think you might, the jurisdictional wetland. And then it is also in the floodplain here, the pink shading here is the 100-year.
Yeah. So we all had to be.
I'm not sure what the base flood elevation is in this area particularly, but they do, any new construction does have to be that 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So actually, let's look at the site plan here, because the, most likely, it's 17.5. Actually, and I think it might even be 1717.
Well, when you built that existing building, that would have had to follow the same standard, right?
Not necessarily.
No, it was before,
Was it before?
but it does have the building does have a LOMA. The
Okay.
The existing building does, and the new foundation is 1 foot above that.
Anybody want to see these up front?
I think we're good. I appreciate the comments, Mr. Rocky. Was there anybody else to speak in the public hearing? Did we have anybody online that wants to speak in the public?
I don't think we do. I think it's just Carla.
Yep.
Oh, and Randy.
All right, sir.
Not to just Carla and Randy. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining.
I am Josh Susi, am I on, or no?
Yep, click it on. Yep, now you're.
Sorry, I am Josh Susi, the applicant on this. Just speaking to a little bit of why, obviously, starting early or whatever there, I mean, it was a calculated risk on my part or whatever. It was more of, I had concrete people, like, at the very end, potentially available for it, that we wouldn't have to all of a sudden thaw all of this ground and all of this, that was gonna have to take place in order to dig this and get all of these in. So I guess that was more of my reason for it, knowing that, like, the lot to the north already has a variance for the exact same thing, and I'm trying to do a line of sight similar to what they have. I guess that was my, it was definitely, wrong and to do that, but that was my risk-based assessment for that. But it is to the specifications needed on that, so there's no question about that.
Can you talk a little bit about the changes that you've brought now today, the changes from this plan versus the plan that was discussed on the 7th?
The previous plan did not show any of this water drainage that we were trying to help with. So we tried the best we could by putting a berm to the south there so we can direct that, because that whole north section along there is a city easement where all the water from the 16th Street there flows into, and then it flows across that curb and gutter to the west. And so we were trying to divert all of the water that we could from that lot and everything to the north to that curb system by doing the gutters and this swale and berm to get it positioned around to where it would drain to the west into the natural drainage area.
And can you talk a little bit about the construction of the berm and the swale? What material would be used?
We would normally use just gravel, I guess, to kind of make that, to where we could still use that for our own purposes of parking there or something too, but make a berm and a swale up against that building or whatever in order to divert it around. But, and I guess my reasoning for the, it being that kind of a setback is otherwise at that 73 feet, it does make it very challenging if it was any closer to now be able to turn a trailer around in between those two buildings and try to back into that building. And I feel it's more of a, it's a cleaner situation this way than if it was up 30 feet and now people are going to stack stuff behind that building. And I feel like it's not going to look as nice as if we could store everything inside the building that way versus all around it.
And the swale construction, so on the south side and the west side of the building, would that be kept open then so we don't have storage potentially blocking the flow of water?
The swale on the west side, you're saying?
Yep.
Yes. Yep. We won't be there. We won't be using the back side of that building at all. No.
And that's definitely a condition too, because there are ordinance requirements about outdoor storage, but that's something that you could condition. And even that we would ask that it be a perpetual drainage easement. Like there is on the north side, there's a 10-foot drainage easement, and then you cannot, what's the word here? Obstruct it, yes.
Brandy, I had a quick question. What is the city's policy on pavement versus gravel versus asphalt chippings on industrial and commercial sites?
Yes, so everything that is not pervious or impervious should be pervious. So in other words, if it's not hard surface with asphalt or concrete, then it should be grass, soil with grass. The parking, access, and loading is required to be paved. There's minimum requirements within ordinance. And then, but industrial districts, we do allow for some overflow parking to be gravel, just because of, it is usually the larger equipment that would create, it would be problematic then if they were parking on just soil and grass, so.
So this property will all be gravel that we see on here, except for the concrete around the existing building.
He would need to extend the hard surface to the new building as well.
So in that area between the two buildings, but the gravel on the north and the south would still stay gravel.
Most likely.
And who makes that determination? Is that a city engineer decision?
Yes.
That'll be at time of building permit issuance?
Yeah, but any of those site improvements, they are, and why I say most likely, I mean, just because it's always hard to just say that off the cuff too, because we're gonna look at those things in depth when it comes through for a building permit, and then that's always consistent with how we look at every building permit.
Right.
But being that water quality is an issue for the city of Watertown and the drainage that comes through here and the gravel, we're gonna wanna try to retard most of the runoff that would come through from a gravel onto other properties and into the system, correct?
Yeah, and that's a good thought too. The only thing is that, I mean, there is the existing wetland there.
Right.
So at least like, but yes, as much runoff as we can deter, that's that's great. That's well within our lines of our regulations.
One of the things I noted on the hydrology of this, the existing concrete pad there, if you look at the elevation on that north pin versus the south pin, it's essentially flat, right? You're talking about a 0.1 difference over that 120-foot slab. If you want to slope that water in between there to the north, you're going to have to build that into where you extend the concrete so that it's pitched correctly.
Yes, we'd actually create a swale in between the two buildings to go up to the second building there, pitching it to the north, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And could I just add something too of just where Todd was going and what you guys could, because I like the idea of, say that on that west side, that you could look at saying that needs to be a swale with grass and soil. So this, and I think,
Just behind the building?
yeah, and I mean, whatever the condition ends up being that the board, if, whatever the board would like to place, but I think you were talking about wanting to utilize this for parking. But just as long as that didn't end up ever being obstructed, where it was, you know, the integrity or how it was built was getting ruined, I guess, from,
I guess,
For lack
and
of
that's
better
kind of where
words.
I was going with it. If we're pushing water to the west, the berm obviously is going to keep will stop any gravel from going to the south or any, particulate. And if you take the swale and it's all grass going to the north, that would at least, again, restrict that particulate from moving over into the lot 2. And that way, and if we put that as an easement or on a no build or no occupy area, and both those, the swales on the south and on the west, I think that would still aid to the goal of water quality.
and I wonder too, sorry that I'm kind of brainstorming with you guys, but Justin, what are your thoughts if this berm was also brought up and eld, like kind of to go with the flow of the swale too, just so there wasn't like escape, and obviously the swale will be inundated further, but if this berm was even just extended slightly, yeah, you're good. So
That makes
that
sense.
could be another condition too that I think would be helpful for protecting runoff onto the south property. That could be an improvement than what is there today.
Yeah, I mean, you can just see some of the existing elevations on here, the direction that the water is traveling today versus what would be proposed here, even on this kind of simplified hydrology analysis. It would definitely improve the management of the water in a direction that you want it to go. I think, Todd, your point is certainly valid. We do need to look at water quality as well as water conveyance. Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anybody else here to speak in the open while I have the public hearing open? If not, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Mr. Case?
The motion would be to approve the variance request to allow the structure to be 10 feet from the west property line of Lot 2, subject to the following: that the drainage of the waters as described in general on the site plan would be adhered to, specifically talking about pitching the water on the concrete surfaces between the existing and proposed building to the north, using of the gutters running things to the north, a berm on the south side of the building curved to push the water into a swale on the west side of the building, all of which I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be a perpetual easement, but there has to be a no build, no occupy, other than maybe an incidental parking of a car on the south side of the building. And also that if this was to fail, they could not come back for 6 months.
Did you want to also include the requirement for grass in the swale?
Thank you, thank you. I knew I was forgetting something, yeah.
I think that hits everything with that inclusion.
Just to clarify too, just on the west side, the swale on the west?
Grass on the west, because you're gonna have a grass berm on on the south side anyway, right?
Yeah. Well,
Grass or gravel?
so I thought
How's that
the
gonna be a-
berm was gonna be gravel. And then, because then that, like, hopefully there is not water runoff over it.
It'll be pitched up high enough so it makes the corn.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, grass on the swale on the west side, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know if the berm itself was gonna be a grass berm or, but since if it's gonna be sleeped up, that the gravel's not gonna spill over to the south, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Have a second. Any discussion on that before we take a vote?
I'll just kind of second my findings from last week where, since it's unlikely that Lot 2 will develop, I mean, there's jurisdictional wetland farther south on this picture, and it's in line with the building to the north that had a variance from years ago. That was why my motion, or my action was to approve last time, and I'll probably stick with it.
And I would concur, and that's basically where I was at. And that's the uniqueness of this site. I think that makes it eligible from a findings perspective. That would allow me to say that I think we're doing the right thing for this specific piece of property.
Yeah, and although I was not at that meeting, I did review the meeting and the minutes. I think what's presented here certainly does help alleviate a lot of the concerns that was discussed with the members of the board at that time, and certainly does align with that long-term water conveyance easement along the north side of the property, and in which we've intentionally wanted to push the water in that direction. Any additional comments? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Dolly,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Case.
Yes.
5 yes, 0 no. That motion passes. That is approved. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda is open public comment. I don't believe we had anybody to sign up. Anybody want to speak on something that's not on the agenda today?
One quick question. I mean, it's more of a comment. I wasn't aware of the up to 5-year rule that we have on the variance and conditional use permits, and I know as staff is working to come up with some sort of sample bylaws that we could be operating from. One of the things that I would rather do is just to include in a bylaw that the rule would be a 6-month wait period unless determined by the board to go longer, and that way we don't have to worry about missing that if we forget to do that in a motion. That way it would be just a standard in a bylaw. So as we're doing our bylaws, that's how I think I would approach it.
And another thing too, we're also going through the recodification. So if recodification, that'll probably get done before bylaws, but we do need to have bylaws too. But we could keep that consistent. So like I said, that's what we do for ordinance amendments of any sort with the rezones or annexations, zonings, any of that. If it's not substantially changed, then they cannot come back for 6 months. That's just stated in ordinance. So we could do the same, because we have, where it's stated in ordinance for the variances and conditional uses or any action of the board, that if an application is not substantially changed and it's not specified by the Board of Adjustment, okay,
I think
that they can't come back to,
they can't request a rehearing for 6 months unless the board was to, at a minimum 6 months, or it's determined by the.
yes, yeah. So I think we just change that section and then make it consistent with 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know what would be easier, by ordinance or by bylaw. Bylaws, we don't have to go through an ordinance, a process. It's just basically, you bring us something, we all agree with it, and that's how we run our meetings.
Yeah, it would be good for it to be written into the ordinance book as well. I mean, that's where most of the public gets the information around, how this stuff works, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as, I'll let you guys finish discussion on that topic, but then I can kind of give you an update on recodification.
Yeah.
You want?
That's all I had, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Todd. And we're on open public comment, aren't we?
Yeah, well, we're on new business, I think, now.
Okay. So just in reference, since I brought up the recodification process, we're still working through that, so it hasn't fallen off the radar. Once we get to the point where we're ready to bring the ordinance amendments, that will, Title 21 and 24 will still come before Plan Commission for recommendation to City Council. So hopefully sometime here in the next couple months, you guys will be seeing that. Obviously, we've made quite a few proposed amendments, so it might be a little bit, like, I'm gonna get you guys that information as soon as possible, once staff has went through it internally, and we're still working on that.
Are you expecting to have any working sessions, or how are you going to have us review the material?
Yeah, and we need to kind of get with Lisa. I didn't plan on talking about this, actually, just talking about recodification. I thought I could.
Yeah, one other suggestion may be is that if we're talking about a carte blanche, extensive changes in a variety of sections, some of them are going to be, potato issues, form over substance. I think those things should be brought to us in one mass. And then I think if there's something that's going to be potentially that could upset the whole apple cart,
Yeah.
I would rather take those down on individual ordinances. So as they come to us, we can still have it all done under one public hearing, but maybe we have 7 different ordinances to address what it is that you want to change. So that way we go through everything and one thing gets referred, and then you lose all the work that you've done.
Yeah.
Just work experience tells me it's a good way of doing it.
I agree, and I think that, like, even just going through it as staff, like, we all propose different amendments, and then it's like, you need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Same with the board, where, like, by no means do we want you guys to feel like this is way too much information, and I feel like are they pulling a fast one? What do we have going on here? So I want to make sure that we are as thorough as possible so that, and same thing, and we're gonna have to do the same thing with council. So we'll have to work through that and see what the best way will be. But I agree, Todd, to break it up in the sections. And that's something too, because as we continue to work through it, and the city attorney is mainly spearheading this. So whatever her timeline is too, I need to catch up with her on that. But it might be something, if there's things that we want to make sure that are in place that have been sticking points for us when we're administering the ordinance, that we could just start there and start bringing them forward individually.
Yeah, to me, it's like, I think, the administrative section is probably the most important part just from the decision making. As long as we are current with statute and case law and how we do our own business that we're comfortable with, I think that's an easy lift. There's not a whole lot of, discussion, but I'd hate to have something thrown out because of the Lake Commercial District and all the other work if we don't come to agreement on those other headier issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one, I mean, specifically, that one might just stay as is too, like, until we're able to dive into that, so. There's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up or adjusted or clarified. So that's been a heavy lift, but it'll be really good to dive into that with you all and hopefully get some of these changes made that will make it's just going to streamline things of how we are hoping to move forward, I guess.
Sounds good. Any other new business? Any old business?
No.
Take a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.